Okay, we're going to begin. So good morning, good evening, depending on where you are in the world. Thank you all very much for joining us for this final Mishna study, memory of Israel ben David, late Eric Samson. We're going to be studying chapter 4, Mishnah number 13. So bear with me for just one moment as it goes as follows. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Hevi Zahar b'Talmud sheshigigas Talmud ola zadon. One should be careful in how they study Torah, because if they make an error in learning, this can lead them to make a transgression, and yet it'll be considered to be intentional. The second part of the Mishnah says, Rabbi Shimon Omer, Rabbi Shimon says, Shlosh kesarim hein. There are three crowns: Keser Torah, the Keser Kahuna, the Keser Malchus. There's the crown of Torah, the crown of priesthood, and the crown of kingship. The Cheser Shem Tov Ola Al Gabehem, and the crown of a good name rises above them all. I'm not sure if you may be familiar with it, but there is a law in Judaism that there's a certain hierarchy when it comes to divvying up various different honors. For example, a Kohen gets called to the Torah before a Levite, and a Levite is called before an Israelite. And this is how it's always been since time immemorial. And this hierarchy is reflected in this Mishnah which we just studied. What Rabbi Shimon is telling us, that first comes the crown of Torah, the scholars, then the Kohanim, the priesthood, and then the king. But rising above them all is the person who has, through all of his good deeds, acquired a good name for himself. The rabbi is great, the Kohen is great, the king is great, but the greatest of them all are those who acquire a name for themselves by visiting the sick, helping the poor, showing kindness to strangers, and making sure everyone in the community has what they need. The question is asked by many a rabbi is, how did Rabbi Shimon reach this conclusion? The works of our sages, as a matter of fact, so much of Pirkei Avot is filled with page after page with accolades given for Torah study. Yet Rabbi Shimon seems to be suggesting that even greater than Torah study is the acquisition of a good name. It's especially astounding when we consider who this Rabbi Shimon was. This was the great sage Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai. He was not an ordinary scholar. Even among the greatest sages of the Mishna, he was known as the Rabbi, he was unique in his stature. He was a person for whom Torah was his sole occupation. He was in a class of rare individuals who studied the Torah day and night without stop. Such people are completely removed from the world, and Rabbi Shimon was one of these people. So why then would such an individual say in this Mishnah that the crown of a good name, earned by one's good deeds for the good of the community, rises above them all, even higher than the crown of Torah? And if indeed this was his belief, why didn't Rabbi Shimon close his books and open up a charitable foundation or free loan society? The Lubavitcher Rebbe reveals the answer through a careful parsing of the exact words in what Rabbi Shimon uses in a Mishnah, which we just read. If you read it too quickly, you're going to miss it. But if you pay attention, you'll see that Rabbi Shimon is giving us the key to his approach, and really the key to Jewish living in general. And it's the most meaningful lesson of all. What exactly did Rabbi Shimon say? He said the crown of a good name rises, it's not above them all, but upon them all. In other words, it's not a hierarchy of one crown over the other. The crown of a good name that is somehow better than the crown of Torah. Rather, it's about taking the crown of Torah or the crown of priesthood or royalty and complementing it by wearing the crown of a good name upon it as well. And that is the calling of every single Jew. Just the study of Torah alone, as wonderful as it may be, but when the two are bridged, then it's divine. Enriching oneself with the divine wisdom of the Torah should inspire us and result in using its teachings to go through life with the wisdom of Torah as our guide. Rabbi Shimon was not standing on a pedestal and preaching. He spoke from personal experience. Rabbi Shimon was forced to flee from the Romans He and his son, Rabbi Eliezer, spent 12 years hiding out in a cave. They did nothing but study Torah, completely detached from the material world and completely immersed in the spiritual. When they re-entered the world after 12 years, they saw a sight which to them they couldn't fathom. There was an individual, a man, out in the field plowing, and they were astounded that what seemingly, here goes, a healthy individual of sane mind would spend his energy standing in a field with straw hat and overalls and plowing clods of earth, when he rather could be spending his time studying Torah. And after seeing this sight, they returned to the cave. And when they re-entered the world after one more year in the cave, instead of being weary of the people living in the world, Rabbi Shimon helped inspire and elevate them. He lit up the world by dedicating his life to helping people solve their real world problems and making things easier for them. Because in that final stretch of solitude in the cave, Rabbi Shimon learned the most important message of all. A Jew must invest in his personal growth and at the same time must know how to take responsibility for anyone within his sphere of influence. There's a story that's told of an old man which passed away in Jerusalem many years ago, and he reportedly left behind an estate worth billions of dollars. And he also happened to be a very charitable and religious man. And the story goes that he left behind 2 wills with instructions to open the first will immediately upon his passing and the second will 30 days later. When the family opened the first will, they found a peculiar request. The father had asked to be buried in his favorite pair of socks. The children didn't know what to do. So they went to the rabbi, who confirmed that according to Jewish law, one is to be buried in simple burial shrouds and nothing else. Rich and poor alike are all buried the same way. And the rabbi went on to explain to them that although your father left that request when he was here in this world, now that he's in the world of truth, he surely understands that in his best interest that he be buried without the socks. And indeed, he was buried without the socks. 30 days later, the second will was opened. And it read something like this. My dear children, by now, you will have buried me without my socks. I just wanted you to truly understand that no matter how much you may have in this world, in the end, you can't even take along a pair of socks with you. Use your time and money wisely. Be there for your family. Make a good name for yourself. Build communities. Connect with your heritage. Help those in need whenever you can. Because you can't take anything with you. Not even a measly pair of socks. But what will always endure is your good name, the good you did for others, and the difference that your actions made in this world. We just come now from the holiday of Shavuot, where we mark the giving of the Torah on Mount Sinai, and we are taught that Moses spent 40 days and 40 nights upon the mountain. And at the end of the 40 days, Hashem gave him the ultimate gift, the 2 sapphire tablets carved by God himself from under his throne of glory. And immediately thereafter, the Jewish people sank to the lowest depths by dancing around the golden calf. And God tells Moses, go down because your nation has become corrupt. What did Moses do? He says to God, if you are willing to forgive their sin, then good. But if not, erase me from your book that you have written. He was ready to give up everything he had for his people, even in their darkest moment of sin. Moses was willing to forgo his own spiritual pursuits if it meant that he could help his fellow Jews, because his chief concern was how he could help his people. God expects us to grow as great as we can spiritually, to immerse ourselves in the Torah, and to simultaneously remember that our people are responsible one for another. Because my study is only as valuable as my ability to feel the pain of another person and to step in and to try to alleviate their pain. I recall a story that somebody in the community here in Irvine, ex-South African, shared with me shortly after Eric's passing last year.
And he shared with me that when he was a young boy, he used to attend yeshiva college. And one of the things they used to do in honor of the holiday of Purim, they would used to perform a Purim spiel. They would go around to various different people in the community, usually during the business day, go to different offices in order to bring a little bit of the Purim joy and to schlep a few dollars out for the school. And he was tasked on his list of places to go was Eric's office. And he says how it left such a tremendous impression that they figured here they are going to Mr. Samson's office, little young kids, 10, 11 years old, and figuring for sure, like some of the other offices they were going to, that the individual didn't really have time to meet with the children. Either he knew it was the annual ritual would come place, they would have a check on the side or whatever it was. Many times some guys weren't to have the time to go to meet with the kids. However, when they got to Mr. Samson's office, he already had told his secretary to let him know that when they arrived, he himself wanted to come out to greet the children, to see what they had brought, to see the performance they came to bring to him. And he said that it left such an indelible impression on him that even as an adult, how he still remembers that interaction, how Eric made each child feel valued and special. This story took place over 40 years ago. And what he fondly remembers is that how Eric was a good man and with a good name. My father-in-law once shared with me that when his father was leaving Russia, escape Russia actually, to come to South Africa, and as he stood at the train station with his father hugged him and says to him, "Remember one thing, it could take a lifetime to make a good name for yourself, but in just one moment it could be lost." He said to him, "My dear son, remember how important it is to have a good name. Make a good name for yourself and be sure to behave in a way that you will take your good name with you wherever you go." I always remember my brother-in-law telling me the story that before they went off to school, how my mother-in-law used to tell him that remember wherever you go, you always take your name with you. So make sure how you behave. Our learning here today concludes the last 5 months of the study of the Pirkei Avot in honor of Israel ben David. And may all of our learning bring great merit to his holy soul. Eric was indeed a person who had a Keser Shem Tov, who had a good name. He was admired for his kindness, for his compassion, for the young, for the old, for the sick, for the soldiers of Israel, for the Judaism in South Africa and in the Holy Land of Israel, and for people in the Jewish community around the world. May his memory be a blessing, and may all this learning be an elevation to his soul. Thank you all very much for joining us for this culmination of the learning of Pirkei Avot in his memory. If anyone would like to ask any questions, you can. Otherwise, that formally concludes the study of this Mishnah. Not sure if they're going to unmute everyone.
No, you do. That's great. There was a very great and well-presented lecture, Rabbi Eli. I loved it.
Thank you. Thank you all very much for joining us, from those locally, from those around the world. We greatly appreciate it, all your participation that you've done over the last 5 months. Wishing everyone well. For those of you here in the Northern Hemisphere, have a happy and healthy summer. For those of you in South Africa, hopefully the lights stay on and you can stay warm as you enter into the winter. Wishing everyone all the best.